everybody, you're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We catch up with Twangling Jack Ford in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review. And we play local, unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. And I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people with MP3s to share, people with stories to share, people involved in the local art scene. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook. If you search for The Archer on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we're repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights, or on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So this week we are going to be chatting to poet Chris Campbell, but before we do that, we are heading over to the Rhylight Zone. And this is Chris Campbell with a reading of some of his poems.
Blossom skeletons. The white blossom tree hangs over the fence, branches swing in night's breeze like puppet skeletons. Streetlight illuminates them like a stage show. Two girls on the branches swing in May, hair longer than the rope. Seeing them transports me into a maze of thick hedgerows lost in early teens. The summer sun hugging my sleeveless arms, new trainers running away with me, an adventure with twigs, imagination and brooks. The girls live in the orange haze of May I loved, swallow the corn-cooked evenings. I will savour the taste, even as I lay my bones under the blossom. Why I salute with miniature swords. One by the 1970s fireplace, I pluck ornamental swords from their decorative holder, between my toffee-smudged fingertips. To the right, opposite your high-backed chair, where you would fight sleep all night watching boxing, is a black and white photo of you meeting King George VI, your navy cap at an angle, upon a grand ship, chests large as sails. We make the same pose, salute picture frames packed with family and friends we hope to take forward with us, always. I clumsily inch the metallic swords back in their holder, drop a few on the carpet. I miss your tattooed hug every time I salute. I watch an elderly neighbour wilt through our kitchen window's frosted glass. A track-suited teenager offers her water. My muddy fleece matches the communal garden opposite, your bump almost bigger than our packed fridge, spitting out the snacks you crave. I'm wearing my best smile, making a joke so funny that drivers on the road below rubberneck. The open freezer door reveals family photos, holiday magnets. I wash salad, prepare olives. You shriek, we're clutching stomachs, and I hear neighbours in the garden tearing up roots. I'm viewing our lives from under our spotlight, planting olive pits and watching you grow, our little one kicking, changing life as we know. Thump your wet, soiled fist, clenched with rain through this thin window pane. The sun paints itself gold on the tops of crop fields, and trees like extended hands smudge a halfway house on the hillside. They rest there for a while. Nothing spills like the early downpour this August morning, when seagulls screech at strips of newspaper and ripped receipts, spat out by heavy recycling bins now on their side, bridging the puddles. They leave splatters of print and the past on our pavement. Can you see it through the now cracked glass, holding wafts of home and wet paint? The sun is sitting on a broken chimney, as flimsy as an umbrella in a storm. Gold fades like the garden honeysuckle. It drops, taking all that's light with it. I scrape the earth underneath this pram to celebrate the moment I am here with my newborn, like initials on a tree. I use twigs to uncover beetles. I hold them up to mark the occasion. The hills huddle around the city, wear clouds like oversized sombreros. Midday reflects off the pram's frame. Spring uncovers fingerprints. The young group behind play George Harrison's Here Comes the Sun under parasols. I'm sat on a memorial bench, my foot above the pram's brake. They grow up so fast, I'm told. It's time to saunter home to feed. Rock climbers reach the cliff top beside us, unhook heavy clips, like my changing bag's small straps, swinging, drawing our easy roadside stroll. The athletes negotiate ice cream, throw down ropes, smiles and sweat drip over cones. I savour the surroundings a last time and notice the plaque behind me. Johnny spent such a happy childhood here. Lift my neck, the view beneath the cliff pops up like my son's toy firefly. Youth will fall behind, but happiness can be found at any time. Decorating the jungle. In the clearing of our jungle, our decorator grabs brackets to refix old blinds, clangs as she climbs up in the winter sunlight, breaking through thirsty plants. She's covered in crusting paint, her pockets a hammock for nails. She steps up, brush as white as her new trainers, somehow spotless, her colleague by the sitting room door sniffing. Hope it's put together well. Her hands move fast with a screwdriver, the only heavy thud when she drops it back on the table where my wife works, pushed back from the window in a cream hoodie, rising over her laptop. I'm waiting to hear if our offer on a home has been accepted. 5 other bids to compete with. The decorator huffs. She's up and down the ladder, short fire red hair and small tattoo on the lower back of her neck. She's taller now as the brackets appear, one by one like fruit in trees, radiator the length of oak branches. In our jungle the leaves hang longer as we fix the decor. They lean towards the radiator from all directions. The seller's decision looms. Joey Barton has the same barber as me. I lean forward in the chair, hair sticking to my linen shirt, and mull over the buzz of aging, my bald patch bigger. Barber says no one notices because I'm tall, but I see the grey strands stolen by gravity, dust in the wind. What about when I'm sat down? My crown in the mirror is a burnt halo. Joey Barton was here last week, I'm told, over scissor snips. Bristol Rovers captain proposed this barber's to the manager. Since coming here, the team wins. Now Joey insists he or the captain get a pre-match trim, a lucky charm, and they can't lose. Barber has been asked to go to matches. One problem, he's a rival City fan and refuses to attend. They've offered him box tickets, so he's away from the fans. He begrudgingly accepts if Rovers reach the playoff final, but warns them he won't celebrate, so not to try with him. I'll be checking the scores weekly to see how they progress, and if they reach the final, I'll watch, thinking about the barber in the box, sombre regardless of result, there for his trade and newfound fame. I'll cheer if Rovers score, jump so high, no one can see my bald patch.
Big thank you to Chris Campbell for this week's entry into the Rhyolite Zone. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain.
It's funny how little you can say when the world is bearing down on you. You bend and you break. It's ironic, you who help everyone else, but when it comes to the ones you love, you only blame yourself. I see her, but she never saw me. The truth is I was stranded on an island out at sea. I hear her calling out my name. There's an ocean in between us, so I guess I better stay. And the truth is she haunts me, I see her in my dreams. She tells me all these secrets, but I don't know what they mean. The truth is she haunts me, she sings to me most nights. The lyrics I don't remember, but the melody I recognize. Ha! I lost it all when my boat capsized. Isolation to endure, so survivor I surmised. I wish I could take it all back. The anger, the anxiety, but my bags were packed. I threatened to leave too many times. This time you call my bluff with good reason and good rhyme. But I wish you'd hear me out. I feel abandoned and alone, and I'm filled with such doubt. And the truth is she haunts me, I see her in my dreams. She tells me all these secrets, but I don't know what they mean. The truth is she haunts me, she sings to me most nights. The lyrics I don't remember, but the melody I recognize. And the truth is she haunts me, I see her in my dreams. She tells me all these secrets, but I don't know what they mean. The truth is she haunts me, she sings to me most nights. The lyrics I don't remember, but the melody, oh the melody, oh the melody I recognize.
That was Siren Song by Jake Cooper of The Phenomenon. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it is time for us to be joined in conversation now by Chris Campbell. Well, the first question is one that I ask everybody, which is, what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
Yeah, so it was a book called We Could Have Been Friends, my father and I, which is it's a Palestinian memoir, and it was my sister-in-law gave it to me. She just read it, and she's quite a fast reader, so handed it over to me and thought I'd like it to kind of. It's a personal memoir. It's by Raja Shahada, who's an activist and author, and his dad was a lawyer and an activist. So it's really well written, and it gives sort of great insight into Palestinian life. And yeah, it's not a very long memoir, but he's a really well known Palestinian writer. And it was a great read. So I'll be passing it on to one of my friends afterwards.
Awesome. Cool, sounds good. And obviously today I want to talk to you about your poetry. So I thought a good place to start would be to ask, how long have you been writing poetry? And if you remember how you first started.
Yeah, I remember sort of being 15, 16, and just sort of writing some poems. I think the first one I ever wrote was called, I think I called it Battle of the April Shower, and it was just, it was April, and it was tipping it down outside, and I wrote about it, and I just enjoyed the process of it, and kind of going back and reworking it a bit, and just kind of, trying to capture one little moment and get that down, um yeah, and not necessarily sort of share it with anyone, but just to kind of have something written down that I could go back to later, and yeah, I think the first poem that I ever wrote was actually, I was a kid, and I was staying in a hotel with my brother, and I thought, for some reason I thought it was Mother's Day and that we hadn't got her a present, so I picked up some hotel paper and just wrote a sort of poem, a pretty kind of, I don't know, soppy poem to your mum, but she still got it framed on the bedside table, and I think that's the first one I remember writing. But I carried on writing every now and again. I went to uni and wrote quite a bit at uni in my spare time, and kept it going in my 20s. And yeah, I'm a bit older than that now, but I'm still doing it.
Cool. And I like the you kind of mentioned as well how that poem about the rain was like kind of capturing a moment. Is that something that you try and do in your poetry?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember there's a poem that I wrote more recently, and it's called "Yellow Pufferfish at Bath Time," and it was just about a bath toy and bath time with my son, and we'd just got back from America. It was the first sort of holiday we'd had for ages, and it was our first kind of family holiday with my little one, who's just turned, well, he's 1 year old tomorrow, and we were in this garden with some friends, and they, it was really hot out there. They had a pool out there, and they had a load of toys in the pool. And just as we were leaving, my wife sort of spotted a bath toy that we've got at home, and she was like, I'll go and get it. So me and the guy, the husband that lived there, went and spent ages trying to fish it out, and then brought it back with us. And then we realized that we had the same one, so we just kind of nicked theirs and brought it back. So it was just about this, it was about a bath toy, and how we now had two of them, and how we'd be posting it back, and that kind of thing. But it was linked to a Percy Shelley love poem. So I entered it into a Percy Shelley competition and ended up getting third place in that. But and I remember going to a church that the Shelley family used to go to, and they're trying to get a memorial for him there. And someone came up to me after I performed it there and sort of said, just asked me a bit about the poem. I just said to him that it's amazing how you can just, have a moment, have like a bath time with your son, and then be able to share it in a completely different context with lots of other people. So
Yeah.
I do find, that is an appealing part of poetry, I guess, for me.
Cool. And I wondered, like, what does your creative process look like when you decide to write a poem? I mean, is it, I guess, something like that happens and you're inspired by it? Do you sit down with an idea, or do you sort of sit down at a blank piece of paper and just sort of write and see what comes to you?
Yeah, I definitely don't do the latter. I tend to get a line or a kind of seed of an idea, and then kind of work that up. I don't know if the process has changed a bit since I've had a little one, because you get a lot less time, especially to kind of sit down with a blank piece of paper. So you're usually kind of doing something else, probably something quite mundane, and then come up, that's when you come up with a bit of an idea, and then I tend to kind of build it around that. Either I can kind of quickly sit down and scribble quite a lot based on that initial line or idea, or it takes a bit longer, and I then just try and develop the idea further and build a poem around it.
Yeah. Cool. And you mentioned the competition that you entered, and I wanted to like ask you, can you tell us about a few of the competitions you've ranked in, and a few of the magazines that your works appeared in as well?
Yeah, there was a competition a while back, that was, it was a new competition, and it was the Portaloe Library in Manchester. So they did about a bit of a shout out for entries, and I'd written not long ago a poem about visiting St Ives. Again, I don't think there's much of a rain theme to my poems, maybe a bit of a nature one, but again, it was just about being in St Ives and it was raining. We dashed into a cafe, and it was about sort of the comfort of being in the cafe and the art of, and local residents or local artists work on the walls of this cafe, and the poems about how how beautiful St Ives in Cornwall is in all weather, and how their sort of art was kind of explained in some way why they wanted to stay there. And so I entered that one and won that competition. And I don't enter a huge amount of competitions, but you do, if you do and you get a bit of recognition, I guess it just gives you a bit of a boost or a bit of confidence in what you're doing, and then kind of inspires you to write more. So competitions wise, I don't enter a huge amount, but I have submitted quite a few poems to magazines and publications particularly over the last year or so, and Green Ink Poetry is a great publication that I entered. I was fortunate enough to get a poem published there. Dreek as well, that's a publication that I've really sort of had my eye on, and there's lots of great poets that I saw we're getting poems published in that publication, and kind of I think Jack runs Dreek, and I think he seems a great guy, and I just thought maybe some of my poems were a good fit for that. And so I had 4 poems published in Dreek, and the online community, particularly from 10-15 years ago when I was sort of sending stuff out and trying to get it published, to now, Twitter's fantastic for connecting with other poets and seeing what competition publications are out there. So I often see where other people are getting poems published, and those poems that I really enjoy, and those poets that I really appreciate. I tend to try and send my work to the same kind of places. So.
Yeah. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Chris Campbell, and this is occasionally David with Yay or Nay.
Yay or nay? Is it? Is it yay or nay? Is it? Is it yay or nay? Is it? Is it yay or nay? I think it's yay or nay. Yay or nay. Oh no!
Yay or Nay by Occasionally David. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to be rejoined now by this week's guest, who is Chris Campbell.
Cool, awesome. And you've worked with a few different presses, so I noted down, I think there's been Alien Buddha, there's been Choir Press. Who's behind these presses, and what can you tell us about what they do?
Well, the Choir Press is a really sort of local business based in Gloucester. So I was a journalist for 8-9 years, and I started off my local paper in Cheltenham and Gloucester, and through a contact at the paper, I found out about the Choir Press, and so I've had 3 collections published, 2 short collections of 25 poems, and then I guess it's a full collection. So the first 2 were self-published through the Choir Press, and they're a small team, but I went to meet them back in 2013 and had a really nice chat with them, and I was, I just thought that they were great people. I was confident with what they were doing. I enjoyed the artistic control, and I had in both the books I self-published, I had an illustrator that I contacted. So I used to live in Sweden, and in Bread Rolls in Dresden, which was my first book, which came out in 2013, there was a Swedish illustrator, a student who illustrated half the poems in that one. And then in last year in 2021, I used to work for a paper in South Wales called the South Wales Evening Post, which is where Dylan Thomas briefly worked.
Cool.
So there was a graphic designer who I met working at that paper, and she's just, her work's fantastic. So she did the illustrations for my book last year, which is called White Eye of the Needle. And she's just great. So that was good. And then Alien Buddha Press. There were a couple of poets that I liked that had their collections published by Alien Buddha Press. So I got in touch with them and then sent a manuscript. I've had a really good experience with Alien Buddha Press. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
And was that designer, was that Sandra Evans?
Yeah. That was Sandra. Yeah. So she still lives in the Swansea Bay area, and she's still graphic designing. She doesn't work at the Evening Post anymore, but she's still doing a lot of. She's very much into kind of Halloween and more gothic kind of designs. But her illustrations are amazing.
Cool. Well, yeah, I thought it was her because I'd got a note to ask about her, and then you mentioned being Welsh as well, and I was like, well, Evans is a good Welsh surname, so it probably is her. But I wanted to ask you about the illustrations in general. How do you think the illustrations sort of work alongside your poems to bring them to life?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting when you chat to an illustrator and then send them. I mean, it helps if you know them well. If you send them kind of a bunch of poems, and then when you're kind of waiting to see how they'll interpret them, how they'll do them, it's a real it's a really sort of interesting feeling. And I tried to when I was talking with them beforehand, I tried not to go into too much detail about the poem, because I wanted them to kind of interpret it in their own way. I didn't want to, I don't know, dictate in any way, but their sort of their thought process around it. I mean, it was great. I think with my first book, there might have been a couple that we changed it slightly, but I think that the poems in that first book are a little bit more difficult to interpret, I suppose. Whereas White Eye of the Needle last year was very much around lockdown and nature and relationships and that kind of thing. And Sandra just illustrated the poems beautifully. Even, sort of mention of, I was living in Nottingham at the time and living opposite a canal, and she did her research, and her illustration of the canal opposite us was, it was kind of almost as if you were walking along it. I was really impressed, and I think my latest collection, there's more poems in there. There's no illustrations, and I'm really happy with it. And I don't think you need an illustration to bring out a poem. The poem should be able to do that on its own. But I think with certain poems and certain books, it works nicely, and it can really add to a book. Add to someone's experience of reading your book, and encourage them to come back to it more.
Yeah, cool. And you mentioned nature a few times, and I read somewhere that you said that like one of your themes is the healing power of nature. What do you think it is about nature that makes it so good at healing us?
I think, I don't just write about nature because of lockdown, but I'm thinking about White Eye of the Needle in particular, and there are a lot of nature poems in there. And I think at that time, nature did sort of help heal a lot of people. I mean, at one point we had half an hour window to go outside and try and connect with the outside world. And I also noticed from my even though I was opposite a canal in Nottingham, we were very close to the city centre, so it wasn't a particular green area, but I noticed from our back window it was almost as if nature was coming in a little bit. The less we were in the garden and doing things outside, it was almost as if the trees were coming in. There were more squirrels, birds. It was in a short space of time you could really notice it. And I think, I can't speak for anyone that has mental health issues or anything like that, but I just think sometimes that the quiet pace of nature and the vastness of it can just, help, I don't know, either put things in focus or at the very least kind of slow down the fast pace of life a lot of us seem to have at the moment. So we're all part of nature, aren't we?
That's what I was going to say, actually, because that's what I was just thinking. So we're all part of nature, but also, again, as you mentioned, during lockdown, it was almost like nature was healing itself as well, because we weren't out there, disturbing it as well. So I think that kind of highlights not only are we, a part of nature, but we have a huge impact on it as well. So in some ways, by taking care of nature, we're taking care of ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I go with that, definitely.
Cool. And I wanted to ask you, and maybe one of them might be the canal, but I wanted to ask you what are some of your favorite spots out in nature?
Yeah, so I was living in Bristol before. Then we were in Nottingham for a few years, and we've moved back to Bristol. So quite a few of the poems in All Island No Sea, my latest collection that was published a few months ago, are based on Bristol and the views, and I find it amazing being living in the centre of or close to the centre of a city, and being able to see hills in the background, and just the amount of green spaces here. So I'm close to Clifton Suspension Bridge, so there's the observatory close by, so that's a great bit of green space that has wonderful views. And I take the weekend, I'm often looking after our little one, so I take him for a walk in the pram, and if he's asleep, then I get a bit of time to write. So there's probably at least a couple of poems about Clifton Suspension Bridge, or at least the view around there. And I'm close to the Downs in Clifton Downs as well, which just great amount of green space, and it's always very active there as well. I mean, if you're there on a Saturday or Sunday morning, you see all the sort of sports groups and runners, and there's a nice sort of cafe there. There's lots of events, and so those are probably my spots at the moment.
Awesome. And you've had some of your poems have appeared on BBC Radio Bristol, right?
Yeah.
Were those some of your sort of your Bristol poems, or and how did that all come about?
Yeah, so they're all from my latest collection, and I mean, I went on the show and talked very much about Bristol and how Bristol inspires me, because it is a fantastic city. It's also got a really good open mic scene, so that there's a good night in Clifton at the Fringe. which is great. And along Gloucester Road, there's so many venues, Stokes Croft as well. So there's a great scene here. But I just sent in a few poems to their uploads program, which is great. It really kind of encourages people of all ages to submit work, and they'll play them on the radio. And I think that they played 6 or 7 of mine from All Island No Sea, and then when they realized that, you know, the collection was being published, they invited me on to talk about it. So yeah, it's really impressive. I think there's upload programs like that across the country on the BBC, but I think the Bristol one is particularly strong. I don't think every area has it, but I think it's something they're looking to roll out more. But yeah, it was a good experience. It was interesting to be on a live radio show for 15 minutes or so, and talking about poetry in Bristol. So yeah, no, it's great.
Cool. Awesome. And I think you've kind of hinted at this, but I wondered how do you balance your work life and then, you know, your personal life? You know, as you say, you've got a 1-year-old and your poetry, and not just writing poetry, but also promoting it as well. How do you balance all of those different sort of elements?
Yeah, it can be hard, and you can sometimes wish for more time. But and I've just started a new job as well, so I'm a couple of months into a new job, which is taking up, you know, it's quite sort of long hours to that.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to be a bit more focused in the windows that you get, you know. Yeah. And I think it can help in some ways. So, you know, because when you're not writing poetry, I'm sure you're kind of formulating it a little bit in your head anyway, and then either, as I was saying before, you might get a line or the seed of an idea or something, but also you might sometimes, as soon as you like just pause for a minute or get a chance to pause, something can kind of come out of that because you've been non-stop for a bit. So and a few of the poems are about my little one, so obviously I love spending as much time as I can with him, and he inspires some of the poems as well. So yeah, I mean, there's always time to do what you want to do, right? You probably just get a bit less sleep. So or
watch one less episode of Netflix or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think TV and Netflix has definitely taken the hit. I've sacrificed a bit of that, but it used to be, if I woke up in the early hours of the morning with the little one, that was actually once I got him off to sleep, or I was kind of rocking him or whatever, that seemed to be a good time to be putting some lines together, to be thinking about it and perhaps writing some stuff. So
cool.
Yeah, don't need to sleep that much, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay, well, I've just got one question left. It's actually 2 in 1, really. So what's next for you, and where can people follow you to stay up to date?
So I'm working on what I thought was just going to be a pamphlet at the moment, but I'm just sort of seeing where that goes. Again, it's kind of, this one is kind of very nature focused, a lot about the coast. So I'm working on that and see where that goes in the new year. But yeah, anyone that's interested in reading any of my work can follow me on Twitter at citizen_Chris, or on Instagram, which is by Chris Campbell, by Chris Campbell.
Cool. And all the books are on Amazon and all those awesome places.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. My websites will be a good place to go. So
good shout.
www.chriscampbellpoetry.co.uk.
Cool.
Big thank you to Chris Campbell for joining me. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Chameleon with Here Is All We Need.
We've come too far to depart. Longing was half spoken, thoughts a word could have been. Vacant gaze in the daytime shows a longing deep within. Here I hold you close, here I hold you near. Here are upturned faces with the air so clear. The way the pages of a heart chose not to leave. Here I drink for freedom's cup. Here is all we need. When they finally come for me, my time is done. Will my dreams be realized when the race is run? Will they stand me up and weigh my bleeding heart? Will they see my love for you pull out Cupid's dart? Here I hold you close, here I hold you near. Here are upturned faces with the air so clear. The way the pages of a life chose not to leave. Here I drink for freedom's cup. Here is all we need. Here is all we need. Here is all we need. Here is all we need.
You'd started work as a bank clerk when the clouds of war appeared. You went to fight, thought that was right. You volunteered, you can't have feared what was to come. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. Put on a ship to distant lands. You fought in fields and on desert sands. First on the beach at Anzio, you had no choice, you had to go, you couldn't say no. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. What's it like to fire a gun, to be shot at or to shoot someone, to hear friends' cries, to see friends die, to wonder when you'll be home again? I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. You got demobbed, went back to your job, working in a bank. No more mortar shells, no more cordite smells. Just checks to exchange, paper to rearrange. Such a change. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you'd told me more. The respects you paid on Remembrance Day to the ones you left behind. Time to reflect, thoughts to recollect. You showed your pride, but kept so much deep inside. I'll never know what you saw. You see, I never went to war. I've got your medals in my drawer. I just wish you told me more.
That was I Wish You Told Me More by Peter Crutchfield, and before that we had Here Is All We Need by Chameleon. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Oak Shed to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
The Groundhogs, Split. In the early 70s, Top of the Pops briefly had an album slot. I remember seeing the Stones doing Wild Horses from their recent Sticky Fingers album, and the Faces with Ron Wood playing a toilet seat guitar. One of the acts I saw one Thursday night was the Groundhogs, a malevolent-looking trio with a wild, grungy sound. The Groundhogs had been part of the 60s blues boom and had backed John Lee Hooker. Tony McPhee, the frontman, maintained a bluesy tone to his singing, a British blues voice a bit like Peter Green and Jack Bruce. But what made him stand out was his guitar playing. Like Robin Trower, he was talked of as a Hendrix replacement. His use of effects pedals, feedback and harmonics made him stand out from the Axe Hero crowd of the day. He employed a Hendrixy Star Spangled Banner noise soundscape to add extra anguish to the suite of songs on side one of the album, all called Split and all being about schizophrenia. Split Part 2 has a chorus, "The dark is too dark and the light is too light." I have heard Tony McPhee's guitar sound described as being like he is playing with rusty strings, each the gauge of a telegraph pole. But I think his signature sound is a deep, unsettling growl, like the moan of a dying sea monster. The original second side of the album starts with their most famous track, Cherry Red, a very fast blues rocker with insane lead guitar. I saw the Groundhogs at the Roundhouse, and Tony McPhee was almost as scary as the bikers who threatened me for standing up. He stalked the stage, he crouched down, his guitar strap distinctively precariously hanging from the wrong shoulder, detuning and retuning his Cherry Red Gibson SG as part of the song, while amateur guitarists like me would struggle to tune up to start a song. A maelstrom of fuzz, wah, echo, hammer-ons and pick slides down the strings, with the precise positioning of guitar in relation to amp to get the perfect feedback howl. I later saw him as a sad old man at Wickham Art Centre, who could not sing or play any but his most basic licks. The Groundhogs, Split.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Chris Campbell for being this week's guest. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. You can also find us on Facebook. If you search for The Archer on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeat on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So that's it for this week. I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is the incredible Umar Ara with Broken Reality. I'll catch you next week.